Hi, this is Dr. Michelle with another tip about secrets of life and death. Today we're going to talk about intimacy and how fear of intimacy can actually interfere with your ability to get the love that you really need and desire. You think it's him, don't you? I understand. And it seems like it's really true. He's afraid of intimacy. He's commitment phobic. He's recovering from a past relationship. And this could go she too, okay? So it could be either he or she. So we're going to just say he, but we mean he or she. Maybe recovering from a loss and not ready to recommit to another relationship. Or maybe abused as a child and therefore really afraid of intimacy. And so it really does seem like it's the other person that needs to change. And you're perfectly fine. Well, that may not be true. Well, on the one hand, yes, they probably do have intimacy problems. But the question is, why do you choose that person? Well, there is a payoff, isn't there? If you choose a person who has issues in intimacy, you never have to deal with your intimacy issues, do you? Also, it's comfortable because chances are it was very much the relationship you had. Hi, thanks for joining. We're talking about love and intimacy and how we tend to choose people, partners that have intimacy issues so that we don't actually have to deal with our own intimacy issues. And so as long as they are the problem, we never have to look at ourselves. And this is really common. We choose partners that have big issues. The question is, why do we choose partners that have big issues? One, it's comfortable. Two, we are afraid of intimacy. Three, we find it safer, and you can actually have a relationship for a long time with somebody who has intimacy issues because you kind of develop the status quo. In fact, my first husband and I both had intimacy issues, and our relationship lasted for 15 years. That's a long time. I was totally tamped down emotionally, and he didn't expect anything more because his mother was tamped down emotionally. And so neither of us ever put the other into a position of having to go further than that. And we had no idea that there were any problems until, of course, the relationship broke up. And I had no idea what was wrong, and he really didn't have any idea what was wrong. He just decided that he needed something new, that something was not working, and he broke it off. So why are you in this relationship? It could be one of three Well, as I said before, the reasons are that because it's a partner's problem, you don't have to deal with it. The next is that you never have to face your own intimacy issues, and that's scary because then you have to really look at where they came from, and you have to do healing. And the other one is that it's familiar. If you're used to a family in which there isn't a lot of intimacy, then intimacy could be really scary. There's also a biological component. If you think about it, when it comes to relationships, we need to also talk about sex, don't we? About having sex with another person. Biologically, that's a very vulnerable situation to get into. Hi, thanks for joining. We're talking about intimacy, and right now we're talking about sex and the vulnerability of sex. That when you open to somebody and allow them to, if you're a woman, to enter you, how vulnerable that is, and how on a biological level your body may actually fear to do that. And so you may shut down, or you may not reveal anything that gives your poor partner an idea of what it is that turns you on. Maybe you never even asked yourself what turns you on, because that's scary. As a PhD psychosocial analyst, which means I look at both the psychology and the sociology of an issue, I have found that there are two major patterns, thank you for joining me, two major patterns or behavior or childhood experiences that set us up for intimacy issues. One is where there is abandonment, and that could be literally the breakup of a family in which the father left or the mother left, and you feel that you can't trust anybody, that if you open your heart, they will leave you. And so you might, as you go into a relationship, already be looking for the signs that say that it's not going to work. In fact, that was my issue in my second marriage. Before we got married, I was already looking for the signs of abandonment ahead of time. And I realized, fortunately, early on, that if I didn't get that handled, I was going to lose that relationship. So I actually did some major early childhood healing. I have to say, though, it is a work in progress. And the levels to which we need to unpack, hi, thanks for joining. We're talking about intimacy and love and relationships. And right now I'm talking about how patterns from our childhood actually set us up to sabotage ourselves. That we choose people that are perhaps not appropriate or have big intimacy issues because we feel safe there. It seems familiar. That it might be really scary if somebody actually made demands for you to open up. And so if it's their problem, you never have to deal with your intimacy issues. And you can just go on saying, oh, they had abuse as a child, they were abandoned, they're getting out of a loss, maybe they lost somebody to death, or maybe they had a marital breakup, and you can put it all on them. The question is, why are you choosing to go into a relationship in which that person is not available to you? Well, it's safe, isn't it? You don't have to deal with your own intimacy issues. But the reality is that if you really want a deep relationship, you have to do the work. So the one pattern I was talking about is abandonment, that your father or mother left you when you were a vulnerable child. And that loss of safety and love and nurturance is huge. Girls are particularly susceptible to the loss of their fathers. I have a client right now who she's never even been in a relationship with a man at all because her father left her. And although he supported their family for years, she never felt safe or even had any idea about how to be in a relationship with a man. And so she has fantasies, but she's never actually taken the step to be in a relationship. I had another client who had a very traumatic experience with her parents. Her mother actually committed suicide, and the relationship between her mother and father were really volatile. And so she chose a man and actually stayed in that relationship for almost 30 years. Recently, he left her, and she couldn't understand because she was really committed to holding on to the relationship. But actually, commitment to a relationship is not intimacy. To have a really satisfying relationship, you need to do the inner work. And that's the kind of work I do with my clients. I'm working with a client right now. Her father was abusive, verbally abusive. Sometimes you have a father who's sexually abusive. And those are actually two different dynamics. The sexual abuse might actually cause, if it's you or a person who's had that, to feel embarrassed or even self-loathing about revealing their intimacy because maybe they feel like, that they're somehow damaged. The client I was talking about, she felt unworthy and she felt fearful because her father was always hypercritical. And so this influenced her ability to be intimate with her husband. Hi, thank you for joining. It affected her ability to be intimate with her husband because of her fear of being rejected. Now that actually is the bottom line on intimacy, is that we fear rejection. And this is not a small thing. We are, as human beings, wired to bond. and to crave affirmation, to crave approval. And when we are rejected, it can be devastating. It can feel life-threatening. And so we work out these various patterns to ensure that we are going to be safe. And sometimes that means literally lowering your expectations. And so you don't put any pressure on your partner to show up more. Ultimately, though, that does sabotage your relationship, because a relationship is an ongoing enterprise. It's actually a spiritual practice. It's a personal growth practice. And if you don't keep on growing together, it loses its juice. It loses its interest, and you get bored. Learning to be intimate makes it really interesting when you start to reveal who you really are. I had another client. She was a people pleaser. She pleased her husband. She moved all the way out to the Midwest, away from her family, away from her friends, to please him. And that habit of pleasing made her boring. And her husband actually got into an intellectual relationship with another woman. And even though he never slept with her, his wife, eventually my client, was really, really angry at him. And she changed from pleasing to controlling and tried to control his behavior. And ultimately, the man died of a heart attack because he couldn't choose between her and this woman who was inspiring him. My heart goes out to her. If she had had the guidance to step into who she really is, to be authentic, to be honest about what her needs were, that relationship would have either turned around or she would have realized that maybe they weren't a match. And when you become empowered in your own intimacy needs, then you start to realize that you are deserving of more than that. And maybe this relationship isn't working, but that's very different from somebody like checking out or dying or leaving you. So let me check my notes a minute. Okay, so let's say that in the sexual act, a lot of us, what we do is we play this game of, well, if you really loved me, you would know what I need. Have you ever played that game before? It protects you from saying what you really want. And maybe you don't even know what you want. If you're a people pleaser, you've never even thought about it. And to change that, you actually have to find out what it is that you like. And then you have to be vulnerable and share that and risk the disgust or rejection of your partner. And yet, it's a very empowering process. And that's what I help my clients to do, is to feel confident enough or to have enough self-love and value that they start to be able to share what it is that they want in a relationship. And when you start to do that, you start to ask more of that person. And they actually get excited because you are being more open and vulnerable. And that's, believe it or not, that's very appealing. Unless you have a partner who's really scared of that, and they may run away. But what's the choice? The choice is to have kind of a loveless relationship. That's not very satisfying. So when you work with me, you learn how to value yourself and really ask for what you need, to recognize who you are and what you want. If you would like to learn more about how I work with people, go to the link over in the comments section and schedule a conversation with me, or send me a message and let's talk. You say, well, why is it important? I mean, do we really need to be intimate? Do we really need sex? Well, the answer is yes, we do, because sex is the second chakra, which is where all of our creative energy is. And if we are not using that energy and sharing it with the world, we are actually not stepping into our full mission and power. Sexuality is part of the experience of living in this three-dimensional reality. And it's fabulous and it's exciting, but in order to have it be enjoyable, you need to share what it is that you want. And that means A, finding out what it is that you do want, and B, taking the risk of sharing that with your partner. And taking the risk of scaring them away. Hi, thank you for joining. We're talking about sex and intimacy, or love and intimacy, and how intimacy is the vital ingredient of a relationship, and how often we run away, we flee from intimacy because we are afraid that if we share who we are, that we're going to lose our partner, and that the fear of rejection is actually greater than our fear of not being ourselves. I would like to change that for you. I want you to appreciate who you are and to really be empowered in love and work and creativity. And for that, you actually need to get intimate with yourself. So here are some other patterns that we use for avoiding intimacy. I've been paying attention to this, and this is one of the things, is that we don't ask for what we want. We ask the other person to say what they want. You know, it's like, oh, let's go to the movies. What do you want to see? And you don't take the risk of saying what you want because, oh my gosh, what if it's a bad movie? And then I'll be responsible. But that's a way of avoiding intimacy. That's a way of avoiding responsibility for yourself. And the second way in which we do that is we want something, but we check out the territory first. Like we check the environment, we check the mood of the person before we really say what it is we want, which, by the way, drives my husband crazy when I say, oh, what are you doing today? Instead of saying, you know, I would really like to have some fun time today. And there are reasons for that. That as a child, it was dangerous for me to express what I wanted because I thought that I was a burden. Maybe you've had a similar experience, that as a child, if you expressed what you want, you were actually burdening your parents, and they would reject you because they couldn't take it on. And so instead of saying what it is that you need, you would sort of check out the temperature and see if they were kind of like open to it. And it's a manipulation. But if you want to be equal in a relationship, you need to learn how to fully embody yourself and acknowledge what you want, to first check in. And I have to admit, that's a tall order if you haven't had a habit of checking in. It took me years to figure out what I wanted because I was a pleaser, and I was in the habit of finding out what other people wanted and never checking in. So that's one of the things that I teach my clients, is how to check in with your body and find out what it is that you like, what it is that you want. It's a wonderful exploration. And at the same time, develop the self-value and worthiness that you need to actually ask other people for what it is that you want. Oh, so here's another pattern. Make them guess, right? If they loved you, they would know what it is that you want. So that way you don't even have to figure out what it is you want. You just get to sit there and be in judgment. Oh, no, that's not what I want. Oh, that doesn't work. Or you pretend it's what you want because you don't want them to feel bad, but then you are never completely satisfied. You're actually frustrated. As I said, you need to own yourself. You need to take responsibility for yourself, to take responsibility for your intimacy needs, and to do the work that's holding you back from being intimate, being vulnerable. And I admit, it's scary because there is the risk of being rejected. And what I have discovered is if you expect to be rejected, you are very likely going to be rejected because you're going to actually do activities that ensure that you're rejected. And then you say, see, I was rejected. I'm not going to do this. That's why you want to work with a coach so that they can help you to navigate that process so that you don't throw it out the first time you receive rejection. And also to develop that self-worth so that you can handle rejection and still feel strong in yourself, to realize that maybe the rejection is really the other person's problem, not yours. So here's the final thing on that. You need to learn how to receive. If you are in the habit of not receiving, if you're in the habit of not even acknowledging your intimacy, you might actually be afraid of receiving. When somebody gives you something, do you have a tendency to push it away or to devalue yourself, or they say something good about you and you say, oh no, that's not true, or here, look at this. That's a habit that you want to change because not only are you not letting yourself receive, but you are discouraging people from giving you what you need. It's a pernicious habit. There's one more thing I want to talk about, and that's what I call the approval addiction. This is a brand new concept downloaded, and that is that as human beings, we are wired to seek approval because it's part of our need to be in community. And whenever we are approved, we get a burst of oxytocin or a burst of dopamine. And so dopamine is actually a drug that's produced by our body that makes us feel good. Now the problem is that when you get that burst of dopamine, it actually pushes you into what's called the sympathetic nervous system. It's high, it's very activated, and it is the same system that's involved in despair and feeling awful. The fight, flee, freeze, they come from the same system. And so when you activate that approval hit, that approval burst, and if later on or very shortly after you get a rejection, you can slide right into that downward spiral instantly because they're the same system. So what do you need to do? You actually need to develop your parasympathetic nervous system. And that's the other thing that I teach my clients is how to develop the ability to handle triggers in a way that you don't go down that spiral, that you stay in a good place without spiking your sympathetic nervous system and setting yourself up for feeling awful. That is pretty much what I have for today. If you are struggling with intimacy issues, if you would like to know more about what patterns you have that are holding you back from really getting the love you want, let's have a conversation. Here's the thing. We need love in our lives. As human beings, it is part of our physiological makeup to have that love. And when we have that love, oh my goodness, there's so much potential for us to be creative and successful and to make a difference in this world, to be all that we can be. I know that sounds like right out of a commercial, but it's true that when you feel safe, when you feel loved, you can accomplish all kinds of things. But if you're constantly struggling to feel loved, you're always on that, in danger of falling down that rabbit hole of rejection, of feeling bad, of feeling unworthy. If you would like to get this handled once and for all, let's have a conversation and find out what the pattern is that you are working with or struggling with that's preventing you from feeling empowered, feeling worthy of intimacy, feeling worthy of your creative energy, feeling worthy that you actually have something worthwhile to offer, not only in your relationship, but in the world. I want to leave you with this final thought. Relationships are the testing ground. They are probably one of the most powerful ways for empowering you. When you're alone, you don't have to push as hard. And you may wonder maybe why you're not succeeding so well. Relationships is what it's all about. Whether if you're an entrepreneur, you have relationships with your clients. If you are working in the business world, you have relationships with the people below you and the people above you. And okay, so you may say, well, where does intimacy come in? If you've read Brené Brown's book, vulnerability is the key word these days, is being willing to be authentic with your people so that they will be authentic with you, so you can find out what the problems are and start to address them before they become dangerous. Well, the same thing goes with relationships, love relationships. When you are authentic, when you share your true self and you open to receiving and giving from that place of intimacy, then you really ferret out, you uncover areas that need to be worked on. Otherwise, they kind of lay underneath the surface until it all explodes. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this today. Please reach out to me if you've enjoyed this, or please post a comment. And have an awesome week. And I keep on trying to click on this finish button with my mouse, but I'm actually on my cell phone, so that doesn't work. Have a great day, and thank you for joining me. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.